Hello, good evening. I am going to go over the two assessments that I want you to try out with your TT in 521. First, just a reminder of where to find these assessments. I'm in the Course Information tab. Scroll down towards the bottom in the Tutoring folder. Open that up. And then if you scroll again down, you'll see the assessment tools. So what I have here is the WTW, that stands for Words Their Way, the Elementary Spelling Inventory. There's directions below that, and then the John's BRI. That stands for Basic Reading Inventory, which is an assessment under the umbrella term of an IRI, which is an Informal Reading Inventory. These are very common in the schools, and so I wanted you all to be prepared and understand how to administer them. Why don't we start with the spelling inventory, since that's a little bit easier. If you open it up, what you're going to do is during one of your tutoring sessions, you're just going to administer this just as you would a spelling test. So you have your student number their paper from 1 through, I think it's 20, and then you just call out the words. Remind your tutee to do your best sounding the word out. So maybe they don't know how to spell the entire word, but they can still get partial credit for knowing parts of the word. So it's important that they do their best to sound them out. All right, so this is the elementary spelling inventory. Just so you know, there is a higher level one for upper elementary, but for the majority of the students that you'll be working with, this is appropriate. As you can see, the words get harder as they go along. So you want to let your student know that the words start out easy and then they tend to get harder as we go along, and to just do your best and write the words as they hear them. So again, you give this as a spelling test. Number 1, bed. The bear slept in Goldilocks' bed, or whatever. And you just go through to opposition. I wouldn't take your time during the tutoring session to grade it, so take it home with you, look it over once you have time on your own. All right, so that's the easy part, is administering it. Now, if you'll notice, this particular spelling test, we're actually looking for the student's ability to spell certain features, certain patterns of words. So it starts out with consonants and moves to short vowels and digraphs and so on. So they can get credit for certain parts of the word. Now, for number 1, if they spell bed correctly, I put a tally mark next to each one. But as you can see as it moves on, like if I'm looking at number 11 here, spoil, I put a tally mark if they got the SP. I put a tally mark if they get an OI, but there isn't one for L. And that's just because we've already done ending sounds and we're beyond that now. Now we're looking for other spelling features. So you just put a tally mark next to each of the spelling feature that they got correct in the word. So I want to show you one that I graded. This one looks a little different because I gave it to a higher level student. So I did give her the upper level one, but it's the same idea. As you can see, you get just little tally marks next to each part they got right. Once you finish going through all the words, you can tally it up at the bottom. So you see blends and digraphs, they got 5 out of 5, then 8 out of 9. Whoops, I touched it. 5 out of 7, 6 out of 8. And then this is where you start analyzing things. It's a little bit subjective, and that's okay. But I look for where the student starts dropping off. And I can see there's a definite drop off during the affixes right here where they're getting 2 out of 4 and then 0 and then 1. Obviously, it's getting harder there. So if you look up top, these are the spelling stages. These are the words their way spelling stages. These are the higher stages, and they go a little bit lower on the elementary one. So you look at kind of where the drop off is. And so I would say they're kind of in that late syllables and affixes stage. And this is great data for you to use because now I'm looking at coming up with spelling words for the student that has particular affixes. Maybe I come up with a spelling list that works with the able and maybe able suffix. So use this information to find the student's areas of needs. And then Words Their Way is a very common spelling program, so you can Google Words Their Way, syllable and affixes stage, and you will find a ton of information. And in week 3, we're going to go over a little bit of spelling instruction, so I'll be giving you some ideas at that time on where to find these strategies. Okay, so that is the spelling inventory. That's one of the ones that I would like you to try. Now let's take a look at the Johns. So you open that up. The beginning of it is a little bit like a running record where you're timing and you are checking for accuracy and kind of making notes as you go along. What the goal is to find the student's 3 levels of reading. You want to find out where can the student read independently without help? Where is that student's instructional level? You know, where you will be working with them and growing their level. And then where is that frustration level? That level where we know they cannot do on their own and it would be even difficult with support. So we want to find out those 3 reading levels. We do that by reading passages and then answering questions. Now, because reading a passage takes a little bit of a time, it's helpful to know where to start. So most IRIs come with word lists. So say you are working with a 3rd grader, you might want to start with the 1st grade word list. And I will show you how to do that in a second. If you're working with a 5th grader, maybe you want to start with a 3rd grade word list, and so on. And this just tells you where to start with your passages. So let me show you an example. All right, so again, I used that same student, happens to be my daughter. And so here's the 5th grade word list. Now, the difference between sight and analysis is what they get the first time and what they get the second time. So for example, she read all of these words, and for furnish, she said furnace, so I just wrote it down and let her keep going. She made a mistake here on blister and blizzard, and so I write the total down, 18. And then I say to her, and this is the analysis part, go back and look at number 9 and read that to me again. And so this time she read it correctly, so I put a plus. Same thing with blister. She read it correctly once I gave her more time, so I gave her a plus. That's called the analysis side because they get a little extra time to look at the word. So now her total is 20. I look at the chart in the bottom, that's independent. So I'm going to keep going because I think she can do a little bit harder than that. So I did the 6th grade list. She's doing great, she's doing great, she's doing great. You can put plus signs here if you want. I don't bother. So for satisfaction, she didn't know what to say. So I just put a dash because she kind of just skipped that one or left it blank. And then for these other 2, I wrote down what she said. Added it up, and then again, I told her to go back, reread those, and all 3 of them she did not get correct. So her total was 17. I could tell this one was a little bit harder for her, so now this scored at her instructional level. So I want her first reading passage, I want her to feel success, so I'm going to drop down. So I'm going to drop down to her independent level, which was 5th grade. So for me, I would start at the 5th grade reading level for her, for the passages. So then you look at the Johns again, and you find your passages. Many of you are working with students that are below grade level, and you had to choose an English learner. So it's likely you could be using 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade passages, and that is totally fine. So these are pre-primer. It's actually preschool. So I'm going to scroll up. So anyway, you can find the passage. You can see, okay, this one is grade 5. And this is your copy. Now you will notice in this packet that there aren't student copies. That is because I found this for free online. And I think if you want the student copies, you have to pay for the whole program. You can do a couple of things. You can take this to a copier and just blow it up and then cut this part out and give it to the student. That's fine. You can retype this and that's fine too. Also, because I do own this program, I scanned the passages, the student passages, and I will email them to you. I don't want to post them in the course. I'm not sure how many copyright laws I'm breaking here, but I will send them to you. So you'll have the student copies, or just go ahead and enlarge it and do it that way. But you'll want to do a few because, like I said, the goal is to find out the 3 reading levels. Most people have to read 2 to 3 reading passages to get to that point. You will need a timer, so you're going to start timing them. There's a background question. You can ask that just to kind of start getting them thinking about the topic. And then you'll time them. And again, the miscue symbols here are the same as a running record. As long as you recognize what your symbols mean, that's fine. I'll show you some of the ones that I use in the sample that I did here. So if they got it wrong, I just crossed out the word and wrote what they said on top. If they self-corrected, which seems to happen a lot, I just put an SC. I underlined it when they repeated the word. And then I put a T because I had to help them. I had to give them that word. So that means teacher support. If they insert a word, you can maybe make that little caret symbol and write the word that they insert. And then I had the time here, 1:09. And what's nice, usually you just take note of when 60 seconds is. So maybe 60 seconds would have been after, word 83 here. And you just kind of keep track of that. These particular passages give you the division problem, so you don't really have to think about it. So you can just take the time at the end, convert that into seconds. So that would be 69 seconds into 6,000, so 86 words per minute, 86.9. Now, when you're looking at errors, there are certain things that do not count as errors. One of those is if they self-corrected, don't count that as a mistake. And then if they repeat something, you don't count that as a mistake. But obviously, any word that they missed or substituted or read incorrectly, or you had to help them, those are obviously errors that should be counted. All right, so you want to find out how many mistakes. So there were 3 errors on this one that counted. So this would be considered her independent/instructional level. So again, you want to think about other things. You'll ask the comprehension questions afterwards. And I'll go back to that. All right, so any of these things could give you red flags. So right now this says, she's doing pretty well. This is independent instruction. But if she read really, really slow, then that's going to be a red flag. Like, maybe this isn't as independent for her as, this number says. Or what about if the comprehension questions, if they're getting below 80%, which is 2 wrong, that's a red flag too. Because we don't want them just to be able to decode it. We want them to understand what they read. So you kind of have to play with this a little bit and make some gut decisions and say, you know what, she read it really well. She was really fast. She read all the words right, but she got 5 comprehension questions wrong. So that's a red flag. I would say stop right there. That might be her instructional level, because beyond that, if she's not understanding what she reads and she's in the frustration zone. Okay, so usually there isn't that huge discrepancy. Usually the comprehension is poor, so is the decoding. But every now and then you come across a student that has really great decoding but really poor comprehension. So keep an eye on that. But it's usually more cut and dry, where the reading starts to get really labored and slow. There's more errors, and you realize they're kind of reaching that frustration level. Okay, and it tells you here how many miscues. And then if they're reading really slow, I remember in 520 we had that sheet where you could look at fluency norms. I can give that to you again if we need it, and just kind of see, okay, well, if she's a third grader, what does slow mean, right? Sometimes it's important to see that. So again, if she did really great on this one, say you dropped one, usually the first one they do pretty well, because if you use the word list, you found that instructional level, you dropped one to their independent, hopefully that first reading passage went really well for them. That should build confidence. And then the important part is go to the next one, because you cannot figure out their needs and their instructional level and frustration level unless you keep going. So you have to keep going until you kind of hit that frustration level. So you'll be going through 2 to 3, and if you started really low, you might have to do 4 passages, but usually it doesn't happen to be more than that. This test will take about, I don't know, about 15 minutes, give or take, depending on how many passages you have to take. All right. And so you just kind of keep looking at, and this kind of information gives you 3 different pieces of information. It gives you information about decoding strengths. You know, were there patterns of errors when she was reading? Did she kind of make similar mistakes over and over again? What can I work on here? It also gives you an indication of fluency level. How is her fluency? Is she reading through punctuation? Is she reading super fast or super slow? That's another area of data for you to consider when doing your tutoring sessions. And then finally is the comprehension. You know, was she struggling with particular comprehension questions? Was it inferential? Was it the literal? Are those something that I can focus on during my tutoring session? So you get a ton of data when you administer one of these IRIs. It does take a little bit longer, but I think you'll find that it's worth it for the amount of information that you get. I am going to send you a couple of YouTube videos that I think will really solidify this, just in case you have any questions on how to administer an IRI or how to score an IRI. These videos are awesome. And then there is also a video I'm going to send you on scoring the spelling inventory. So just in case my awesome video didn't clarify things, I think the YouTube videos will seal the deal. All right, you all have a great week, and let me know if you have any questions about this. Good night.